Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our first series today. My name is Tiffany Parrish. I am one of the board members with Nina Haven, and so thankful to be here this evening with you all, and so thankful for those of you that are watching the recording of this later. Again, we are so honored to have Dr. Jill Weber here with us today. I'm going to read a short introduction before I hand it over to her. Dr. Jill Weber earned her Ph.D. in clinical psychology from American University, with a pre-doctoral internship at the University of Virginia Counseling and Psychological Services, and a postdoctoral residency with the Fairfax County Community Services Board. She has advanced training in psychological assessment and psychotherapy, and extensive experience in university counseling centers, community mental health centers, and private practice settings. Dr. Weber has served as a staff psychologist with Fairfax County Community Mental Health Centers and has taught graduate psychology courses and is as an adjunct professor. She writes a regular blog for Psychology Today and has written a number of books on managing anxiety, building self-esteem, and healthy relationship development. And she's the daughter of our Nina Haven board members and former executive, Judy Weber. Dr. Weber enjoys what she does and believes we are all learning and growing. And with that, Dr. Weber, I will hand it over to you. I know we are all very excited to hear what you have to share with us today. Just the unmute button, and that's a good reminder too for those of you on. If you wouldn't mind staying muted throughout, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we can bring those up as we're going through the conversation today.
Great. Well, thank you, Tiffany. And I'm excited to be able to talk about this subject. I think the young adult years, the college years are so valuable for growth. It's such a fertile time because all of the wiring in the brain hasn't completely set and the patterns aren't totally developed yet. And I think we can change patterns at any point. But the nice thing about being a young adult is you can, start laying down the groundwork for some really healthy habits and ways of connecting with people. So I thought I would just start before the questions talking about things that can be very helpful to work on while you're a young adult or a college student and entering the world of partnership and coupling. And, usually there's a lot of things happening at once, when you're in college. You might be working on your degree, your friendships, your hobbies, and having fun. And usually for most people, they're also thinking about romantic partnership. And I think there's some key areas that if you stay focused on over the next 5 years can really be very helpful in finding healthy attachments. And the first thing I would say is to grieve, which I know is often sort of hard to hear, but most everyone, and even young people, have relationships to grieve, whether they had some kind of trauma in their childhood or difficulty with their caregivers, or even difficult relationships in high school or early college years. And it's important to kind of take stock of those relationships, kind of what happened, what needs of yours went met or unmet, how you might have impacted the relationship in a negative way, and how other people may have interacted with you in a way that was harmful or not good for you. And you have to really feel those feelings and kind of go through the tunnel and get out on the other side in order to be ready for your next relationship. It's very common, really, at any age, to end a relationship and just immediately get preoccupied by the next one. But if you don't do that kind of grief work to really understand what happened and in your past relationships, we end up repeating things over and over again and having more and more grief. And by the time you're 40, you can have a lot to work through. So that would be number one. Another thing that is pretty natural to be working on as a college student, and you don't even really think about it intentionally, but is self-esteem. And not just self-esteem of, oh, I'm a good student, or I made, good grades, or I got into a particular program, but really emotional self-esteem, feeling like you know yourself, that you understand yourself, and that you're confident enough to be able to communicate it, who you are, to the people in your life, and not just your intimate partners, but even your friends or family. And that is harder than it sounds. It's really easy to get swept up in things and and think you're something that you're not. It takes time to really get to know yourself and understand who you are. But if you don't feel good about yourself, and this too is very common, when we don't feel good about ourselves, it's easy to get pulled into a relationship that is a way that we get our self-esteem needs met. So, oh, this person likes me, then I must be good enough. But then when that relationship doesn't work out, or there's an issue or tension, you can completely crumble and feel awful about yourself. So by building your own self-esteem, you're less likely to kind of outsource it to your romantic partner. The next piece is to eliminate toxic attachments. And by that, I mean, it's very common to repeat certain kinds of dynamics. And you may already be repeating these dynamics with friendships or romantic partners. But the idea that there might be certain kinds of people that you're attracted to, whether it's romantically or friendship wise, that maybe aren't that healthy for you. So sometimes it can be helpful to literally kind of write down the kinds of people that you're drawn to, even if you haven't had a significant relationship with this type of person, but the things that you think you find attractive in somebody, that they're confident, that they're outgoing, whatever it is. And then try to think about, all right, well, what might be not good for me about that particular thing? Like, why am I so drawn to that? Because sometimes we think something sounds really great, but that might be really not good for us. So you have to kind of look at those patterns and who you've attached to over time. And another way to do it is to think about what kinds of people in your life bring out the best in you, people that you feel secure with, you feel like you can be yourself, that you're pretty open. And oftentimes those people don't have these huge personality traits like amazing and super outgoing. So instead of getting kind of pulled into those sort of sexy categories, really sitting down and thinking through the personality traits that bring out the best in you and help you to feel the safest and most yourself. And if you have connections with people that are kind of dysfunctional or toxic romantically, even if you're not in a committed partnership, I would really consider ending those relationships because they tend to kind of siphon off the gas needed to form healthy relationships. You might be getting some of your needs met there, but not all of your needs met there. So you're not ready to go elsewhere, but yet you're kind of stuck and not completely happy. So it's important to let those kind of attachments go. And the next piece is to building your intimacy skills. So by that, I mean learning how to communicate your needs, whether that's emotionally or sexually, or what you like or you don't like to do, your preferences, what upsets you. And research shows that we're attracted to people who have similarly developed levels of communication skills as we do. So what that means is if your communication skills aren't that great, you're very likely to partner with someone else who doesn't have that great of communication skills. And in that way, a couple can just kind of stay stuck. They just kind of keep repeating the same problematic dynamic because neither knows really how to communicate their needs or emotions in a different way. So if you can right now start learning how to understand yourself primarily and then put that self into words, and this can be over even minor things like, having a preference with your friends over what kind of food you want to order that night or where you want to go out, but learning to be able to express yourself, in particular, the vulnerable parts of you is really important so that when you are in a relationship that you're more at ease doing that. And the next piece is that I see very common is believing what people say or show about themselves. It's really easy in romantic love to make excuses for people, to justify mistreatment of you or behavior that isn't really healthy maybe for you. And I just encourage you, at this stage of the game, it might feel like you have a lot to lose, but you really don't. There's plenty of time. And if you're noticing that somebody is continually making you feel bad about yourself, or that you can't really be yourself with somebody, or someone says things about themselves. I mean, this is very common. A romantic partner may say, oh, I don't really want a commitment, or I hate communicating, or I just can't stand feelings. I don't want to talk about feelings. That if you say to them, well, oh, hey, I kind of do like feelings, and you don't get a response and they're not interested, it's probably okay to just walk away from that. When people say these things and you try to get into the discussion and it doesn't go anywhere, you should trust that this person's telling you something. And it's easy to get into a mindset that maybe we could fix or change the person, get them to come around. But that's just really a waste of your time. And it's not helping you grow your own intimacy and communication skills. So believe what people say and show you about themselves. The next piece is avoid what I call sextimacy. And sextimacy is this idea of wanting maybe deep down an emotional and sexual connection with somebody, but feeling like the emotional piece is just too hard, or you don't know how to do it, or you're afraid your romantic partner isn't interested in that piece. And so by kind of jumping straight to a sexual relationship, there might be deep down a hope that that will lead to also an emotional connection. But very frequently, this too becomes a waste of time in a way that you're not really challenged to grow, because the relationship often just kind of stays in first gear and your emotional and intimacy skills aren't developing. So be wary of, oh yeah, I think this guy or gal is going to come along, and really ask yourself if you're being honest with yourself, because by and large, there's not really a shortcut. You've got to get through that get to know you process, really know what someone's like, and see if they can take an interest in really getting to know you to form a more committed kind of partnership.
Dr. Weber, can I ask a question before you go to your next
Yeah.
topic? You mentioned in a relationship like that, what you just shared, kind of stays in first gear. What does second and third gear look like? What is the difference between those?
That's a great question, Tiffany. So the first gear might be like, I see this person, here and there, but there's not really any connection going on, like between our brains. Like we're not actually talking about or revealing or disclosing things about ourselves that are a little more intimate. So second gear might be, talking about your plans. You might be able to say, yeah, well, this weekend I'm doing X and Y, could I see you at this point? And they might agree to that. Second gear might be talking about your classwork or your interests. Third gear might be, so the answer to your question is, it's like stages of intimacy. And usually intimacy is based on self-disclosure, disclosing things about ourselves. But if we disclose it all in first gear or second gear, people get overwhelmed. They're like, I don't even know you. I don't know how to put you into a context. So it's sort of like upping the level of intimacy. And at each union and at each point, you feel like your partner reciprocates that level of intimacy, maybe share something about themselves or makes you feel good about what you shared. If you don't get that feeling, most people don't keep upping it. They start to feel a little skittish, like this thing isn't going to go to third gear. And then we don't want to share much about ourselves. We start to feel frightened of that kind of vulnerability. So I would say more levels of vulnerability and communicating your needs, your wants, things about your past. Eventually, ultimately, no topic's really off limits. You feel like you can bring up pretty much anything. And even if it's a heated discussion or things you don't agree about, you have confidence that you will get through it and feel better after that interaction. That's kind of the ultimate.
Awesome. Thank you.
And the next piece is really important for young adults is, this is kind of psychologically really what's going on in college is, in addition to all the other stuff, like your academic life and figuring out what you want to do with your professional career, is separating from your family of origin. So you're there, you're in maybe you're not living, you may even be living with your parents, or you may be living somewhere else. But either way, a huge task of young adulthood is to begin to start kind of being your own person. And that process can go on for a number of years, but it's really important. So if every time, something happens, your parents are still kind of doing the heavy lifting for you, then it becomes hard to be your own person. Or if you're still letting your parents control every aspect of your life, you're not being your own person. Or if you're having to take care of a caregiver to your own detriment, it makes it hard to be your own person. You got to kind of look at those things as it's like taking away energy to really launch into adulthood. And it is a launch, and it takes a lot of energy. So step by step, you want to just, and separating from your family doesn't mean that you don't still see them and love them and care about them. but it just means that you are making decisions for yourself, that you're becoming over time more and more independent. And even if you make mistakes, that you're able to live with those mistakes because they're yours, that you're not looking to other people for a tremendous amount of guidance, because no one, not even your family, can really tell you what kind of career is going to be best or what kind of partner would be best. Those are things that you have to do the work to figure out. But when we don't separate, then it becomes really hard to find a partnership, because you're still kind of got some of your needs met by somebody, by your family, say. And that way you're not really fully vulnerable with this person in your life. You're kind of can be like a half person with him or her. So that's a big task that goes on for a number of years. And giving yourself the space to do that is really important.
And Dr. Weber, how would you suggest, someone balance both that, pursuing that love interest in that relationship and your career without really being dragged down by either one?
Okay. Okay, I was just looking at one of the questions. That's great. I would, that's a great question too. I think the way to look at it in terms of the partnering is to really not look at it like a job. Like, it's a very easy, even, at any age, really, I think for dating, to look at it as a task. Like, I have to find somebody. I have to find somebody to validate me. I have to find somebody that likes me. And every time it doesn't work out, you can feel like a failure or terrible about yourself. And it becomes a real job. And so if you're doing it that way and working on your career and your academics, it gets really depleting, and you can burn out on both fronts. So I think that for most people, the career and the academic side is pretty defined. You've got some hurdles you have to get through, or some jobs you have to get through to get to the next space. With the romantic side, it's really important, and I know it's so corny and trite, but to look at it as a learning process, that you don't really need anyone. You're not desperate to find someone. But it's really an experience of getting to know probably quite a few different kinds of people to figure out what type is good for you, what types of people bring out the person that you are deep inside, or help you to be your real self, and to learn how to, as I said earlier, express yourself and communicate your vulnerabilities. So looking at relationships more as like a learning process until you find the person that you like. And again, this one's kind of corny, but it is very true. Really trying to find or treat new dates or new romantic partners as friends, people that you want to get to know and hang out with, and you want to have fun with. And that can too take off the burden. So it would be great if it all worked out and it was also a romantic partnership. But in the meantime, there's plenty of ways to still have fun with it, to feel like you're growing, you're learning better about yourself, you're learning more about how to be intimate and communicate vulnerabilities, or you're just having a good time with someone. Those are all other good reasons to date than this sense of your self-worth being on the line. That's when people get very burned out, and that can affect your academic and career pursuits too, because your self-esteem can take a hit if you're approaching dating in that way. I think I saw another question. I was just trying to find that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can go ahead and share. This is in the chat from one of our participants. So if a partner has a defined problem that they are working on, should you hang in?
That's another great question. That's a gray zone, because the reality is most humans have problems, and if a person has a problem and they understand their problem and they have self-awareness around it, and they're seeking whatever kind of help or resources they need to support them in that, then absolutely. The issue becomes when someone isn't really aware of their problem, or they use you to fix the problem. So, so if a person says, I have a history of depression, but I'm on, a treatment regime, or I have a therapist I meet with regularly, and here's the things that I figured out that help me most. That's somebody who's got self-awareness and is actively coping with their issue. On the other hand, if somebody really doesn't admit they're depressed, but you see them, down in the dumps or suicidal and calling you in a crisis to fix them, that's more toxic. So it's really about self-awareness and people taking care of themselves and not farming all that out to their partner. I mean, but sure, someone's going through a depression and they're going to need comforting and care, but that's not the same as expecting you to fix them every time they go through one of these bouts.
And if you don't mind, just to add on to that, and like you mentioned, everybody comes, with their own sort of um, challenges or baggage. What if both people in the relationship have too much baggage? Is there kind of a red line or a boundary of, what, probably best to just stop this for both of us?
That's another good one. I mean, I think like I said before, I think if most people have baggage. So, and I think a lot of people feel very ashamed about their baggage, but as you really own it within yourself and understand yourself and go through your own self-help process, however you wish to do that, it doesn't have to be psychotherapy, but that is one very helpful way. That helps lighten the baggage. But I hear your question, is there a line? There can be. I mean, like I said, if two people struggle with similar issues, it can get hard, even if you've both done some work on yourselves, it's like that piece of research that we do kind of hit some level set point of like how far our partner and we are of being able to communicate, of being able to deal with adversity, of being resilient. So if you both struggle in those similar arenas, it can get hard. I'm trying to think of a good rule of thumb of how to know. I mean, I guess one way to really know is if you're consistently feeling defeated in the relationship, if there's a lot of arguing and conflict that never seems to get resolved, these themes just keep repeating, you feel like you're just banging your head against the wall, and you try to talk and it just seems to devolve right again back into that same pattern. These are signs that it might be toxic and not salvageable. It doesn't mean the person is toxic. It's just, certain matches just aren't a match, just not a fit. People can bring up things for us that just aren't healthy. And it takes a lot of maturity to recognize that and let those folks go. I think the last piece I was going to say in terms of kind of being in shape and working on yourself in the dating world is putting yourself in new situations. University life is so unique. Young adult life is so unique because there's just so much to do and novelty is everywhere. It's very easy to just get kind of in your crew, maybe, on your dorm floor, your particular social club or whatever you do. But being on a college campus or even just being a young adult in the professional world, really trying to take those new opportunities to connect with different kinds of people and doing activities that you don't ordinarily do. Whether it's like an intramural sport or some kind of club or organization. But that would probably be my biggest piece of advice is to take advantage of the campus life, to force yourself to get out of your comfort zone, be around different kinds of people and do different kinds of things. Because that really kind of changes our own wiring in our brains. It shows us other things are possible, that maybe we're able to do things we didn't think we wanted to do or were able to do, and also brings you around different kinds of people that you might not have been exposed to previously, but that might be good for you. I think I saw another question here.
There was one that came in asking if you believe in soulmates.
I don't. I think I'm just not. I don't know what's wrong with me that I don't, because I think it's such a beautiful concept. But I don't. I think there are probably multiple folks that people could fall in love with during a lifetime. It's just about the key fitting the lock and your attachment histories coming together in a healthy way. And I think, I guess that is sort of that kind of takes away the romance, but it can feel like a soulmate. It feels really special. Everybody doesn't make us feel that way. That's why it's special. But I don't feel like it's faded and that it's probably as hard to find as we can feel like it is when we're going through these times of dating. Particularly if you take an active approach and you're really working on yourself at the same time and being honest with yourself about how people affect you and your own weaknesses and what you need to work on. So I guess that answers that.
And throughout the conversation so far, you've mentioned healthy and unhealthy traits at times. Can you share what some signs or even red flags of an unhealthy relationship are?
Yeah, that's a good question because it is, and I do see a lot of young adults that, I'm sorry, my dog's barking, that are, they go through relationship trauma, and relationship trauma is real. I mean, it can, and that's the other thing about being young is when you have traumatic relationships, they do set down a pattern in your brain that you start to feel like, oh, that's just how love goes for me. That's how dating goes for me. And you may not even be thinking about it that way consciously, but your brain has that feeling. And you can repeat those dynamics throughout your life. I mean, you can even be married and be repeating those kind of traumas. Um, so it's really, really important, and I'll give you some signs that if this is happening, yeah, to get some help, to talk it through with somebody, and to consider, ending the relationship. It's just not worth setting down those patterns that can be harder and harder to heal over time. But yeah, one big sign is a one-sided relationship, like where you feel like your needs just aren't being met, that maybe you're turning yourself inside out, trying to make sure your partner's happy, you're obsessing about if your partner's happy, um, try to be accommodating, but the real you hasn't come out, maybe because you haven't put it out there or your partner's not making you feel like they care that much. And so your needs are kind of, lower on the totem pole. That's definitely a sign. Or the opposite, if you're somebody that's kind of taking advantage of somebody else and you're making the all, kind of taking all the air out of the room so that everything's about your needs and not the other person. That's a sign you're not ready for a true partnership. Another sign is if you find yourself making a lot of excuses, rationalizing this person's behavior, maybe your friends or your family notice things and you work, an overtime to justify them or over explain them. Um, Another sign is that you're cautious to bring this person around your family or friends, or you kind of feel like you're in a bubble, an isolated world with this person. And maybe that world feels special and good, but the idea of opening that up to the world is kind of frightening. You got to ask yourself, well, why is that? What's unhealthy or shameful about this union that I can't be open about it? Um, what's another example? Certainly, if there's any kind of physical abuse or sexual abuse, the one that's much more common, though, of course, is emotional abuse. Whether you are making your partner feel bad about themselves or they're doing that to you, that's definitely a sign. So being upset about something is normal and happens in any relationship. But if you or your partner is upset and then making the other person feel like a bad person, a failure, um, you know, lots of other words, about whatever it is that's upsetting you is a problem. So emotional abuse is usually a pattern that will continue without some kind of intervention. Trying to think if there's any other good signs. Well, I mean, another one is just not being able to be your real self. This is very, very common in young adult years because it's just a lot, it's a lot of things you're working on at the same time. And all this doesn't have to happen in every relationship. That's why it's a process, a learning process, but certainly not bringing your full self to the table is not a good sign. If you're pretending or trying to be perfect, for someone, you don't want them to see any of your flaws. You don't want to be vulnerable. And at the end of the day, that just becomes a very empty, hollow union. I guess those are some signs.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that vulnerability in romantic relationships or outside of them is so important to grow in life in general.
Yeah, and it can be feel overwhelming, but a good place to start is even with just close friendships, where you don't have quite as much on the line as a romantic attachment.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we had another question come in the chat, sharing that the advice that you've shared really feels like it would apply at any age in life. Are there other things to consider at different phases of your life?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And many people who divorce or separate from a long-term partner go back and kind of revisit a lot of these things in therapy or through their own, self-help journey. Um, I think the thing that gets harder when we get older is, like I said, the exciting thing about young adulthood is these patterns are all new for the most part. I mean, there's usually childhood stuff to work through in those college years, but in terms of romantic partnership, a lot of that stuff is kind of new. But by the time you're 40, 50, we have lots and lots of patterns to look at, and sometimes trauma to look at relationship trauma. So that's different. And that really takes some deliberate work and an acknowledgement within yourself, like, okay, I've been repeating these things. And really being able to stare that in the eye, not deny that. And then doing the work to understand that what's going on. And I mean, I see it all the time in my work, even people that are 60 years old or older, can undo patterns and can have insights. I mean, I think it's painful. I'm thinking of a particular person in my mind right now. It's just, it can be really painful to be, in your 60s and going through a divorce, say, and for the first time in your life, figuring out, what you've been missing and what you've denied yourself emotionally it can be really painful, but it usually always leads to something else, something, more fulfilling that you haven't had before. So I guess I would just say it's important and fruitful work at any age to do.
We've talked a bunch about doing that work, right? As us as individuals and in relationships to have the best, I think, life possible. Do you think there's such a thing as having too much baggage to find or even maintain a lifelong relationship?
I do not, Tiffany, absolutely not. And I know sometimes people feel that way. I mean, folks can go through a lot. And again, that trauma is a big one, going through um, traumatic life events, abuse, neglect, poverty. There's so many things that people go through. And but no, and part of it is really believing that, it's because in the end, right, it's about being unconditionally loved by somebody, feeling like I can go to this person and say whatever I need to say, and I'm usually going to feel better, and I can do that back for them. And that's why partnerships usually last. You regulate each other's emotions, and there's that kind of easy intimacy. So even if you've had a ton of baggage or trauma or mental illness, it is absolutely still possible to find that. I mean, I think it definitely takes acknowledging within yourself, very likely with the help of a therapist, kind of what you've been through and what you need to heal. Because when we go through difficult things like that, it's easy to just kind of internalize it. And then and that's one of the reasons it repeats, right? It's like it never got processed adequately. And it's impossible to do that all on your own in your own head, particularly if you've gone through trauma. It really helps to have somebody in your life that you can work with on that.
And that perfectly leads into, it's like you're reading my mind over here with the questions that are coming up.
Right.
Um, but for those for individuals listening and maybe listening to this recording that are thinking, yeah, well, this sounds good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But you know, are thinking that maybe they may not have trauma, or maybe it's not necessarily falls in the definition of trauma, but effects of their childhood, the family they came from, like you mentioned, certain factors like poverty that they may come from. You know, what would you suggest to them of taking that first step of even asking the question of, is this something that could be impacting me, my life, and the relationships that I'm having with folks?
What would be a first step to do that?
Hmm.
I mean, the first step is just accepting that, I think, like that everybody's childhood affects their adult attachments. I mean, that is pretty clear in the research and in the way that people describe their adult romantic love. So it's just kind of becoming, accepting that. And of course, it's hard because whatever the pain is, and it's all relative, it could be, trauma, but it could all, you're right, it could just be family dysfunction, it can, whatever it is, everybody's got something. And owning that and looking at that, making space for that is really what's healing. It's the denial that keeps people stuck. No, I'm fine. I'm just going to push all that away and keep going. And then people get in a frenzy to just keep escaping their pain, and then the pain mounts. So making a space to accept it and look at it in room to process, which I guess too just gets into the idea of taking good, solid care of yourself, always, but certainly as you're doing this work, like, eating well, getting good sleep, exercising, journaling. If you're not working with a therapist, journaling or reading self-help books. but making some room to kind of treat yourself in a way that shows your own good self-care and that you're acknowledging what you need to grow can make a big difference. But instead of just kind of, like I said, staying in a frenzy or being on a race to get somewhere, because then you get, maybe you get married, but you're married to somebody who's treating you in an abusive way or in a way that wasn't good for you in your childhood. It's not worth it. Better to do the work and really find a safe and solid attachment.
Right. And I think for those of those in our alumni network, especially those that are still in college or getting ready to graduate in your early 20s, it's so easy to be in that frenzy of the check boxes and doing the next thing. So thank you so much for that. I think that's so important for people to know.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's really like when you're older, you're like, gosh, you still have so much time. But I know it's hard to feel that way at that space, but it's like laying down the foundation of the house. You want it to be solid, even if it takes a few more years.
Right. Being okay with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's for those of us that aren't in our 20s anymore, it's so much easier to say. And then those that are listening that are in their 20s, like, yeah, okay, but listen to us again in 10 years and see.
And I think you can still have fun while you're doing it,
Absolutely.
still dating and doing fun things.
Absolutely. And what would you say is the true purpose of finding love and a lifelong companion?
That's a big one, Tiffany. I think it's that unconditional love. I think that sense of I'm fully accepted as I am. And as I say, that doesn't mean there aren't boundaries and that you're not able to communicate your boundaries and accept your partner's boundaries. But I think it's that idea of feeling really at home and at ease with somebody. And life has lots of amazing qualities, and there's also lots of hard moments, and feeling like you have somebody that accepts you and loves you wholly is very regulating for a lot of people. And um, and of course too, someone that you can enjoy life with, that you can laugh, that you have things in common, whether it's activities or things you like to talk about. So what's the point is, I guess, a sense of attachment. I mean, and attachment, as we know, starts for babies, in utero and when they come out of the womb. So it's for most people, it is kind of a lifelong desire, whether it's working well or not, that we want to attach, that we want to have a close connection in our life, because it regulates our nervous system and our emotions, and lots of research that healthy close relationships help people live longer. There's one study, the Harvard adult life study, that showed that even when people are in their 80s and they're in a lot of pain with a medical condition, that if they have a healthy attachment, romantic attachment still, that they have the pain, but that they're still happy. Whereas folks that are more lonely don't feel that way. They feel that they have the pain and they're unhappy. I don't know if I explained that very well, but so close attachments throughout the lifespan regulate us, help us live longer, and bring meaning to a lot of people's lives.
Thank you for that. That's so interesting. Sounds like it affects the quality of our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Wow. And this is going to be another one you may not like me asking this one, but is there a way to really, and I know I don't like to use the word, ensure, but is there a way to know, this is a good person for us? This may be the one.
I think so, Tiffany. I think so. I think it's like, of course it takes time. And it takes time, and I think it takes time to know yourself. So feeling, I mean, gosh, I feel so old saying this, but feeling that way at 20 is a little complicated, because we do change and we do grow, and we might not be our full personality yet, at least the way in current times and the way our culture is. So those two caveats: it takes time, it's hard to know ourselves fully. But beyond that, I mean, if you're with somebody and you're like I said earlier, you're regularly feeling regulated by them, like, wow, I'm really myself with this person. when we have issues or arguments, I usually feel better, not worse. We're growing as a unit, like we're not regressing or becoming more dysfunctional, but we're actually improving together our own self growth. Those are all really good signs, that this is somebody that's healthy for you in your life. Whether you decide to stay with them permanently or not, it's like a complicated question. But yeah, people that generally make you, where you feel like you're more yourself, that you don't have a lot of insecurity or anxiety, and that whatever's going on in your life or their life, you're able to make each other feel better for the most part, not worse.
And are there, or I should say, what are the signs of maybe being in a relationship with someone who is taking advantage of your love?
Signs of that are really, sometimes it's just emotional too, just kind of feeling, you have an interaction with this person, maybe you're excited to be around them or see them, and then afterwards you end up feeling kind of empty or low, like, gosh, that didn't really give me the, what the meat and potatoes of what I thought I was going to get, so you're sort of left feeling disappointed a lot, or empty after an interaction. Certainly if it's pretty one-sided, so you're obsessing about their needs more than your own needs. Feeling like you can't fully be yourself with that person. And this idea of just that you're not taking good care of yourself in those ways I described earlier, where your own self-growth is getting thwarted. That's a big sign, and it's a common one. Maybe you're on a certain path as a single person, and then you end up in a serious dating relationship with somebody, and all of a sudden a lot of the goals you had as a single person are just gone, like, whether that's career or psychological or physical fitness, whatever it is, but that you're kind of losing yourself, because you want to be with a partner who cares about you enough to notice your goals and inspires or helps you to stick to them too, not that you lose yourself to them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I had another one and I completely lost it. I'd love to invite anyone else that's with us today. If you have any other questions you'd like to add in the chat, now is a great time to do that. Oh, I remember what my question was too. For those listening in, especially if it's the recording later, our alumni network is large. We have alumni members of all different ages. So for those that are listening and may still be in their college years, where maybe a romantic relationship isn't top priority for them, but we've talked a lot about, and you haven't really said the word self-love, but self-care, and loving yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Can you share a little bit about that and how for someone especially who may not have any sort of experience seeking that sort of care, whether it's through therapy or journaling or some of the other self-care techniques you shared earlier, why that's so important, some examples, and for someone thinking, I'm ready to start this journey, kind of where do I start?
Yeah, I think self-love is a great word for it, Tiffany. But yeah, that would be the first step. And that's a good way to just organize that concept, that to begin a different kind of relationship with yourself is how I like to look at it, on every level. And a good first start, I mean, you could there's lots of workbooks on Amazon, or certainly plenty of self-help books, or journals now are really big, of just self-esteem journals, where you kind of forces you to think about yourself in a different way. But the overarching principles are just, by and large, developing a new way that you connect with yourself, particularly when you hit setbacks or hardships. Just that kind of little voice in our head, that internal dialogue. If you just pause, and listen to it here and there, you might notice that it can be critical or negative, or saying things in a harsh voice or a mean voice. But learning to talk to yourself in a soothing, calm, realistic way goes really far. And that really helps with the romantic piece too, because as things come up, that you're not going to beat yourself up for every misstep as you're going through the learning process. So working on that internal dialogue is really big. Another piece is learning to be alone. I mean, I know we're talking about coupling, but learning to be alone with yourself is a huge, huge skill that will help you in romantic partnership. And by that, I mean enjoying time alone, being able to spend a weekend or an evening where you're not feeling miserable and lonely, but you're feeling excited to do the things that you enjoy doing, even if that's eating good food and watching Netflix, whatever it is. But just that you can sit and be with yourself in a way that is fulfilling and makes you happy. Um, and then some of it are just those basics that I mentioned earlier, being able to have the self-discipline to eat pretty well, exercise, get good sleep, take care of your surroundings so they're generally organized, or your bills. Just that kind of self-care is really important too, and helps people to have greater self-esteem. So yeah, if you're wondering of a good first step, I think that's right, Tiffany. Self-love is a great way to organize it. And that doesn't mean you wouldn't still date and meet new people at the same time, um, but it is a skill to start cultivating.
And again, I'm thinking of, those in our alumni network that might be in college right now and on universities. And you may not have the answer to this question, just given your experience working on college campuses. Um, are there resources available on campuses that students could look to for support for that, and to really begin practicing that as early as possible?
Absolutely. I mean, one great thing about being on a college campus is most all college campuses have university counseling centers now, um, which are free and part of your tuition, and usually have therapists and psychologists and people even in training that are learning to become psychologists. And that's just a great, great resource. And they have another awesome resource on a university counseling center is group therapy. Because when we're in group therapy, we really learn a lot about ourselves and how we interact with people. People give you feedback. You feel like you're getting some real in vivo exposure to how you come across and what you need from other people without the risk of a relationship, because it's confidential and everybody kind of goes their own way after. Also, university counseling centers will have lots of usually have seminars on things like self-esteem and self-acceptance, romantic attachment. So that's a great resource. And, too, I think really getting involved in whatever community where you are can be very helpful for self-esteem. Finding organizations that help you grow and make you feel competent and effective outside of just your academic work is really important, so it's not all down on just being a good student.
Awesome, thank you. I didn't know that myself, so that's really awesome. Thank you so much. And we had one more question come through the chat. Um, how would you, or do you have advice for a couple that really is committed to one another, but also really trigger one another?
I do. I feel like I see that couple a lot in my work. um, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when you're in that space where you just keep triggering each other, usually that's because neither of you have really gone, to the next level of your own understanding of yourself. And if you're being triggered by your partner continually, you have to ask yourself, why am I still in this? What is it about this trigger that's a pattern for me, separate from my partner? So it's not just about your partner. It's probably about, in addition, something within you that you keep reenacting. And for a lot of people, that has to do with childhood dynamics, maybe how you were treated or not treated well. But there's usually something deeper getting enacted there. And two people can have a similar attachment history and kind of do that to each other. And it gets really complicated. But the way out of it is to start owning it for yourself. Like, why do I keep repeating this habit, or this pattern? And where does it come from for me? And what am I going to do to change it? Because if you just keep projecting, it's kind of like projecting, you just keep looking at it as your partner's problem. If you keep triggering each other, people stay really stuck, because then no one grows. You just kind of keep blaming each other back and forth. Then you make up, then there's like another round again and again. So building your own awareness for your patterns, where they came from, and how you yourself as an individual want to shift out of them is important. And sometimes when people do that, and their partner doesn't do it, their relationship ends. In other cases, both people work on themselves and it grows and improves. But it can happen that you outgrow a relationship. You just figure out your stuff and your partner hasn't done that work, and you're over it.
Right, right. Sounds like one of the themes that at least is sticking for me from listening to you, and this has been really wonderful. So again, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and sharing with us. Um, we have a few minutes, so I want to, open the floor for you with all the questions that we've asked and that have come through. Are there any last parting words or advice that you have for our alumni network?
I don't think so. I guess in terms of the piece about dating, my last piece of thought is just, it's okay if it doesn't work out, really trying to look at these relationships differently and not feeling like your whole self-worth or self-esteem or future is on the line if a romantic union doesn't work out, and that it's just an opportunity to grow, learn more about yourself. And of course, it's sad. But as I said earlier, I think there's a lot of people. I mean, the population is huge, lots and lots of other people that you can attach to as you're ready.
Right. And I know the focus, on this conversation has been a lot about love and romantic relationships, but wouldn't you say the same thing for friendships too, knowing that it's okay to walk away from any sort of relationship, romantic or not?
Absolutely, Tiffany. That's so right on. And it's such an easier way to work on some of this stuff. And along with self-love, it's another piece of university life, finding close friendships with people that you can start working on being vulnerable and recognizing when something's toxic or unhealthy for you. But absolutely, it's a way to attach across a lifespan, to look at it that way.
Well, Dr. Weber, again, thank you so much for your time. I know I have learned a lot. I wish I had a time machine so I could have learned some of these lessons maybe a decade ago. But again, so thankful for your time and your expertise and to share this with our alumni network. So thank you again.
Oh, such a pleasure. Really nice to be here. Thank you.